All, and welcome to 2023's first edition of the Premier's monthly press conference. I wish you a happy, bright, prosperous, and healthy 2023. For those of us who are joining us for the first time, these press conferences are all part of the Nevis Islands Administration's new thrust towards openness, transparency, and accountability. This morning's press conference will be conducted as follows. The Premier will make his statement, and the members of the press corps who are present will be given the opportunity to ask their question. In so doing, you are kindly asked to ask questions and not editorials. Those of you who have your phones, kindly turn them off or turn them on silent if convenient. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming to the podium the Honorable Premier of Nevis, Mark A.G. Brantley.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of our press conference. I'm happy that we're starting on time, and I'm hopeful that we can keep that kind of momentum for the new year. This is our first press conference for 2023, and certainly the first of this new term. I start by thanking members of the press and wishing you all a happy new year, and for those who are listening and viewing, a happy new year to you as well. Of course, these press conferences are intended to be an opportunity to share information via the press with the general public, but also to present myself as the head of government in Nevis to the press for questions and comments, for clarification as the case may be. And that is, I think, a very important role in a democracy, for us to seek to be more transparent and more open. And this is a commitment that we have made, and a commitment, thankfully, that we continue to keep. Let me start by thanking the good people of Nevis, who on the 12th of December would have voted in overwhelming numbers for the Concerned Citizens Movement, the party that I'm privileged to lead at this point in our history. The Concerned Citizens Movement not only won the popular vote, but we also won the majority of seats, and therefore have been sworn in to continue in government for a second term. And so we are truly grateful to the people of Nevis for continuing to repose their trust and confidence in my administration and in my party. I start by congratulating the staff, principal, or we say in the primary schools, we should say head teacher. That's what the law refers to them as. So let me say the head teacher, staff, and students of the EPPS, the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School, on the occasion of the celebration of their 15th anniversary. And I would want to extend warm congratulations to them. The EPPS has been an institution that has done really well. As part of their 15th anniversary, they had a relay competition at the Mondo facility, the Nevis Athletic Facility, and we extend congratulations to them for that event, which was wildly successful, and for their sterling contribution in education, sports, the arts and culture on Nevis. EPPS is very well known. They are in my constituency of St. John's, and they do an excellent job, and I congratulate them all. Let me also congratulate our 3 junior Calypsonians. They would have competed in the junior Kaiso competition for Sugar Mass 51 and St. Kitts, and they won the top 3 spots. The monarch was Princess Sinevia. First run-up was Invincible. Second run-up was Dequan. And so all 3 from Nevis placed in the top 3 positions in the National Junior Monarch competition. I think that is worthy of note, and I congratulate them. We also, of course, extend congratulations to Young Vibrations, Poinciana Rhythms Steel Orchestra, and Orley Rhythms Steel Orchestra for placing first run-up, second run-up, and third run-up, respectively, in the PAN competition at Sugar Mass 51. I want to make special mention of Young Vibrations, which is headed by Chavonnet Maynard, who works with me in the office of the Premier, and to say that PAN is alive and well on the island of Nevis. In fact, I was very impressed to learn that for Sugar Mass 51, the majority of bands in the competition were from Nevis. And we are hoping to continue that investment. We expect shortly to receive, I believe I was told, 37 PANs from Trinidad a donation from the Winsong Foundation to augment what we're doing at the NCDF with pan and pan plane on the island of Nevis. And we want to see that art form of steel pan continue. It has huge popularity here, and we are certainly investing in moving that forward. And so we'll have some new pans available shortly to infuse what is already happening, and we congratulate all of those who have participated in the competition in Sugar Mass 51. Let me also congratulate a young woman I'm very proud of, young Shalisa Glassford. I'm told that she's been transferred from Park Hyatt St. Kitts to the Park Hyatt in Australia, where she will assume the role of front office manager. And so I want to extend congratulations to our own Shalisa Glassford for making her mark in the tourism industry and now going all the way across the world, from Park Hyatt St. Kitts to Park Hyatt in Sydney, Australia. It only reinforces what I keep saying, that we are only limited by the size of our ambition. Because here's young Shalisa, who will now be taking up a role all the way in Australia, and she clearly could only have had that role offered to her because of her talent and her ability. And so congratulations to her. Let me also congratulate Ms. Latasha Isles and Mr. Onaje Amri. They have been named respectively Sportswoman and Sportsman of the Year for 2022. And I extend my heartiest congratulations to them both. And also, of course, I congratulate Miss Ajuma Liberd, Mr. Callis Farrell, or I should say Dr. Callis Farrell, and Miss Sharon Mwangi. They have all been awarded scholarships to study medicine in Cuba. In the case of Dr. Farrell, he will be specializing, I believe I'm told, in anesthesiology, a discipline that we desperately need on the island. And so I extend congratulations to all of these young people for their excellent performance and wish them well in their endeavors and in their next steps. I move from a note of congratulations to a note of condolences. I would want to use this rostrum to extend condolences to the family of Mrs. Clara Walters. Mrs. Walters would have passed away, and of course, she is a well-known individual in Nevis. She would have worked for many years in the public service and has contributed significantly to the Nevis that we all know and love. And so we'd want from this rostrum to extend our deepest condolences to those who survive her, her children and grandchildren, and all of her family members who now mourn her passing. And indeed, for all others who have lost loved ones, I extend my deepest condolences. Let me move on, ladies and gentlemen, to some other updates. Let me move quickly to the Ministry of Health. Urology and Associates successfully hosted their annual free prostate screening on Saturday, the 14th of January, after a 2-year hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm told that this year they had a record number of men presenting themselves for screening. Some 726 males were screened from across the Federation. We would wish to express gratitude for this collaboration and thank local coordinator, Nurse Jessica Scarborough, Dr. Dwayne Thwaites, the urologist, and his associates, along with the many volunteers who remain committed to this initiative, which is now in its 16th year. 16th year. And I think that that is instructive. We know what a prostate exam entails, and we want to commend the menfolk for responding in such large numbers to this. We know that early detection saves lives, and that black men in particular are very prone to prostate cancer. And so detecting at an early age through prostate screening saves lives. And we want to thank Urology and Associates, Dr. Dwayne Thwaites, Nurse Jessica Scarborough, and the entire team for sticking with this for the past 16 years, with the result that we now have some 726 men that were tested on Saturday the 14th. And so we welcome that initiative and we commend all of those who are involved in it. The Alexandra Hospital, some good news as we continue to build out our infrastructure in healthcare. We have expanded our diagnostic services by procuring a Cobas E411 chemistry analyzer. The cost to us was US $61,500 $472. The machine, when it is commissioned, will be able to process for donors HIV, Hep B, HCV, HTLVI2, cancer markers, PSA, thyroid function tests, fertility profiles, and other special chemistry. These tests would usually have been sent to sync kits to private labs for processing. And so we are hopeful that with this investment of some $61,472, we will be able at our own hospital to provide some of this testing and provide quicker diagnostics to our people. That is what we're seeking to achieve. And I commend, of course, our new Minister of Health, the Honorable General Nisbet, and her team for this undertaking and for continuing the build-out of the health infrastructure on the island of Nevis. In recognition of World AIDS Day, as we continue to say to our people to get tested, to know their status, World AIDS Day was on the 1st of December 2022. But the Health Promotion Unit hosted its annual HIV testing after a 2-year hiatus as well due to COVID. A total of 99 persons were counseled, tested, and provided with information on how to protect themselves and their partners from contracting HIV and other STIs. The ministry wishes to inform persons that HIV rapid testing and counseling services are available at the Health Promotion Unit and at health centers. A walk-in rapid testing schedule will be posted on the Health Promotion Unit Facebook page and at the respective health centers. All that this is saying now is that the old-time days of having to go and take some blood and wait for days to find out what your status is in terms of HIV testing, those days are over. We now have rapid testing available to us where you can walk in, get tested, and walk out. And we're encouraging persons to do that. Of course, it is entirely confidential, and we urge you to know your status to get tested. In recognition of Cervical Cancer Month, Community Health Nursing Services will be offering free pap smear screening for women on the 28th of January at all health centers starting from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. The pap test is the most common test used to check for early changes in cervical cells that can lead to cervical cancer. We again continue to say early detection saves lives, and we encourage women to go out. Just as we encourage men to get their screening for prostate, we encourage women now to get screened in terms of the pap smears that are going to be available on January 28th at our health centers. We oftentimes ask women to encourage their menfolk to go and get screened for prostate. So now it is time for our menfolk to encourage their womenfolk to go and get screened at the free pap smear screenings that we are putting on. Let me switch over to the Ministry of Education. I believe all of us are excited because the track season has now started, and already the Elizabeth Pemberton Primary School has had their relay festival, and I want to commend them and also to commend Mackie Trust and A1 Farms, who were the primary sponsor of that event. All of the primary schools and high schools will be having their various events. I ask you to look out for the calendar of events. All the meets will be at the Nevis Athletic Facility at Long Point, except the preschools and the Violet Jeffers Nichols Primary and St. James Primary Schools, and all will be starting at 12 noon. The Department of Sports has now, of course, been subsumed by the Ministry of Education, and it has purchased, through the Nevis Island Administration, approximately some US $30,000 worth of equipment to be used in the upcoming track season. The equipment includes an Earthlinks Vision high sensitivity color camera, electronic starting system with gun, weatherproof wind gauge, and a portable display board. Testing and training of persons on this equipment has already been started under the supervision of our own Mr. Garfield Virgo, and the new equipment was in fact tested and used at the recent relay competition put on by the EPPS. Ms. Nicola Fraser and Mr. Garfield Virgo would have organized a training session on Saturday, January 14th in the area of officiating track events. 31 volunteers were in attendance. This coming Saturday, there will be a similar training in field events at the same venue, which is in the Nevis Disaster Management Department, and the practical sessions are being done at the Nevis Athletic Facility. The facilitators for both training sessions for this Saturday are Mr. Dawnville Francis Blake and Miss Eunice Greenaway. The Department of Sports has also held a relay workshop for coaches that was done on January 11th at the Alberta Payne Community Center, and we had 26 coaches participating. The workshop was facilitated by track officials for the St. Kitts and Nevis Amateur Athletic Association, the persons of Lorenzo Wilkinson and Eunice Greenaway. So, we are training our officials to ensure that we have better officiating. We're training our coaches to make sure that our athletes are better conditioned, and we look forward to an excellent track and field season. On Wednesday, the 18th of January, a very important announcement, a contingent of senior education officials led by the Minister, the Honorable Hugh Troy Liburd, would have gone to St. Kitts to participate in the launch of the Enhancing Learning Continuity Project. The project, which was conceptualized during the COVID-19 pandemic, seeks to ensure that students will be able to continue learning in spite of challenges which may cause the physical closure of schools. Some components of the project include devices for students and teachers, training in cyber safety and security, support for students with special needs, and parental support. The project has been made possible through funding from the Caribbean Development Bank. And lastly, in education, let me use this rostrum to congratulate the staff, principal staff, and students at the Gingerland Secondary School. They are celebrating their 50th anniversary. In fact, it was on January 24th, 50 years ago, that the school was started. And we give thanks and praise to them. They continue to do an excellent job in educating the people of Nevis. Switching quickly to tourism. The Malcolm Gishard Recreational Park would have celebrated its first anniversary. It was celebrated on Monday, the 16th of January, 2023. And it was done then, notwithstanding that the first anniversary was back in December of 2022. It was done then to coincide with the birthday of the person for whom the park is named, the late, great Malcolm Gishard. A 4-by-3-foot painting of Mr. Gishard, done by local artist Jimmy Simmons, was unveiled by his widow, Mrs. Yvonne Gishard. The MGR Park was officially opened on the 19th of December 2021. And since its opening, we have had approximately 40,000 visitors to that park. I want to commend Mr. Dane Sandiford and his staff for keeping the park in pristine condition, and allow me again to thank the government of the Republic of China, Taiwan, for the outstanding support and collaboration with the Federation over the past 40 years, and more specifically with the island of Nevis, in making this park possible. Work has already commenced on the Pinnis Beach Sustainable Tourism Project, also referred to as Pinnis Park Phase 2. This aspect of the project, valued at some US $3.3 million, will see the upgrade of the restaurant and beach area to the immediate west of the MGR Park, and will include proper drainage and flood control, lighting, parking, landscaping, and bathroom facilities, and a boardwalk. The development is expected to take approximately 16 months to complete, and we ask, of course, patrons and users of that facility to be patient with us as we build out the infrastructure. We intend, when it is done, to have something without comparison in the region or in the world. We intend to have a first-class facility there, and so that construction has already commenced. In Nivison Heritage Village, also the brainchild of the late, great Malcolm Gishard, will celebrate its 20th anniversary on the 22nd of February, 2023. We ask you to mark the date, because the event will be marked by a ceremony, cultural presentations, and sale of traditional culinary items such as goat water, black pudding, potato pudding, cook-up, hot bread and butter, and local drinks. During the celebrations, and this is important as we continue to try to empower small businesses, during the celebrations of the 20th anniversary of the Nivison Heritage Village, we will see the opening of the on-site restaurant Heritage Cafe by Mrs. Sophia Wallace, and that will accompany the Heritage Gift Shop that is there as well. The general public is asked to attend as we again try to build out these various facilities, which are a critical part of our tourism infrastructure. Let me extend some congratulations to my friend, Mr. Llewellyn Keynes. And if you all are asking who's Llewellyn Keynes, everybody knows him as Sunshine. He and his famous Killer Bee has been named by Caribbean Journal as the best rum punch in all of the Caribbean. The article states, and I quote, "Sunshine has found unimaginable renown, serving up killer bees on Pinny's Beach, the spectacular coastline on Nevis. Nevis's western end. Join pilgrims of punch who have heard the stories about this legendary drink for decades." It goes without question, members of the press, so please don't ask me, that the recipe for the killer bee is a well-guarded secret. Let me also congratulate all of us in the tourism industry, because Nevis has been included in the list of best islands to visit in 2023 by Caribbean Journal. In the January 2nd, 2023 article, the Caribbean Journal says this, and I quote, "Nevis, tiny Nevis has always been a place that's punched above its weight. From its home as the birthplace of Alexander Hamilton to more recently the scene of a newly vibrant film industry. It's just a lovable island, from the historic charm of Charlestown to its elegant hillside inns to the impossible to resist killer bees at Sunshines on Pinny's Beach." I believe those are good accolades for our beautiful island. An announcement that we have made before, but since we're getting closer to the date, I'm pleased to say that Cape Air will once again be flying into the Nevis Airport, the Vance Amory Airport, effective February 15th. They will have non-stop connections to St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands, 1 flight a day during the week and 2 flights on Sundays. The daily flights will depart Nevis at 10:15 a.m. to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, and then incoming flights will depart St. Thomas at 5:15 p.m. to Nevis. Now, what is good about this is that Cape Air has interline and code share arrangements with American Airlines, Delta, JetBlue, and United. And so it means that if you purchase a ticket, you can fly via Cape Air to JetBlue, American, Delta, or United from St. Thomas to anywhere in the world that is accessible from the Cyril King Airport in St. Thomas, Virgin Islands. So it creates another option for our people, whether they're coming in or going out, a seamless option to connect via the USVI. And because of the large number of flights going into the USVI, we are hopeful that we will see some traffic coming from that direction and onto Nevis. And equally, Nevisians traveling onwards can now use that route to get to the United States and elsewhere. The Nevis Tourism Authority started the new year with the announcement of the Miller Aird Destination Marketing. They will now handle our sales representation for Nevis in North American market, effective as of January 1st. Cynthia Miller Aird and her team bring over 30 years of sales and marketing experience in the Caribbean region to this new role on behalf of our island. And we wish them well. If they do well, the island does well. Let me move quickly to agriculture. We would like to announce, and we're asking you to hold these dates, mark these dates in your calendar, that the Ministry of Agriculture will be hosting what they're calling the Agri-Expo 2023. We used to call it the Open Day. They say that it is so open they now have to call it an expo. So they've changed the name. The dates selected are the 30th to 31st March 2023. The theme is Together for Food Sovereignty, Agri-Expo 2023. The aim of the expo is to include more stakeholders and services that support agriculture. We are also inviting persons interested, and this is important. We're inviting persons interested in broiler production, that is, chickens for meat, chickens for chicken parts, broiler production, to register with the Department of Agriculture as soon as possible. The contact person is Mr. Floyd Liebert. The ministry is moving ahead with this project and is in the process of procuring a turnkey processing facility with a capacity of processing 700 birds per hour. The equipment is expected to be on island within the next 7 weeks and operational within the first half of 2023. Put differently, we've already moved ahead with the acquisition of the equipment to process the birds and equipment which has a capacity of 700 birds per hour. So that is quite an extensive number, large number of birds that can be processed by this equipment. We've already done the necessary in terms of purchasing. We're now awaiting the equipment. We expect it within the next 7 weeks on island, and thereafter we expect it to be commissioned within the first half of this year. Put differently, we are serious about developing this broiler industry, and for us to have local chicken available to create an added string to the local economy, and also to ensure that we cut back on the massive importation of chicken that we have had over the years. We've been talking about this project for quite some time, and I want to thank the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, who really led this initiative with some gusto. He's the architect of this, and now the Honorable Eric Evelyn, who has taken over that ministry, will continue to put this into play. We have already identified lands for farmers, and we will be offering a package of concessions to stimulate and encourage this new industry on the island of Nevis. So if you're out there, you want to invest, you're a young person, you want to invest, we are suggesting that this could be a good way to go in terms of our broiler industry, and we are serious about it. The model will be just like the animal industry that we have now, the meat industry that we have now. The government will have the processing facility, and the people will be expected, farmers, to grow the birds and bring them to the facility to be processed. This way we control quality, and we can ensure that what comes to your supermarket shelves is the very best quality chicken. It will be better, I assure you, than what we're importing. And so I encourage people, as I always do, to eat local, to eat more of what we grow and to grow more of what we eat. I believe it is better for us in terms of our health. We also save money, and we also generate local business activity, which is so critical to grow our economy. Let me just switch now and tell you a bit about Culturama. It is well and truly on for this year. The Culturama Secretariat is already inviting slogans for Culturama 49. The official dates for the festival have been fixed at 27 July to 28 August, and the deadline for slogan submission is Friday, 17th February. We are also open, the pageant registrations are open, and they're seeking participants for all the shows. Miss Culture Queen, the Miss Culture Swim and Mr. Cool contestant, Mr. and Mrs. Talented Youth Pageant, of course, Kaiso, all of the shows. We are inviting persons to come and to participate. Switching now to the Ministry of Works. The Public Works Department shall be shortly resuming its projects in Bath and Butlers. Those projects are substantially completed, and the hope really is to have them completed, both of them, by May of this year. The Island Main Road project from Cliff Dwellers to Nisbet Estate has resumed as of Monday the 9th of January. Quite an amount of work has been accomplished thus far. For example, the partial reduction of Hurricane Hill just after Orly as we head towards Newcastle. We continue to ask for the motoring public and the general public at large to drive with caution while traversing the project site. We are also working to provide alternative parking arrangements for those persons who park along the side of the road in the vicinity of the Orly water taxi pier operations. I should advise that we are practically at the point now of completion of the purchase of some lands in that area, and once that is done, we shall create proper parking and ensure that the congestion that is ordinarily perceived at that facility is eased. I should also advise that the construction on the reception area continues apace, and we hope that that building will be delivered to us in short order. So we are doing the necessary improvements there, as that has now become a major gateway to the island of Nevis. In terms of water, the Pond Hill tank is now almost complete. By the middle of February, the tank will be fully sanitized and filled with water, and once filled, that tank will distribute water to places like Meads Pasture, Cox, Cligot, Chickenstone, Taylor's Pasture, Maynard Ground, Beaumont, Montpelier, Brown Pasture, Burden Pasture, Beach Road, Morningstar, and Coal Hill. So that's a very important investment. Let me commend Minister Spencer Brand, who has really been a champion in terms of water security here on the island of Nevis. We are also, very good news, preparing the request for proposals, or RFP, for data collection, design concept, preliminary estimates, and utilities preliminary designs for the Long Point to Hanley's Road project, what we're calling the South Coast Road, and we expect the RFP to be ready and to be issued very shortly. That will allow us to open up an area which has been hitherto inaccessible. That is the south coast of the island of Nevis. We have committed to it, and will shortly be issuing the RFP so that we can get a sense of cost and design. Some not so good news, but I think it's important because I have heard the complaints about potholes in the roads. We understand we have had some very heavy rains, and that happens when we have these rains that are unusually heavy. But we have had a fire at our asphalt plant. And that fire, what was observed was that the entire heating unit for the heating storage tank was engulfed in flames. That happened on December 20th, 2022. Once this fire was put out, it was found that the bitumen heating system had been damaged. The control panel, the two burners, and the two electrical motors were also destroyed. The heating insulation covering of the storage tank also sustained some damage. Insulation and covering are being repaired currently, and we are sourcing the parts for the repairs of our asphalt plant. Now, why you might ask, is that relevant? It's relevant because it has severely restricted our ability to get the necessary material, the asphalt that we need to repair our roads. And as a consequence, you will see that we have resorted to repairing some potholes with concrete. And we've been forced to do that because we are still in the process of repairing the asphalt plant. But we understand that motorists were complaining. And so I ask again for your patience. These fires happen. Sometimes this appeared to have been a freak accident. But the result is that the plant has been damaged and we now have to repair it. I want to thank the JICA, the Japan International Cooperation Agency. They sponsored, fully funded a session held in Barbados from January 16th to 20th. The NIA was represented by 8 persons, 2 from the Department of Planning, 2 from the Nevis Water Department, and 4 persons from NEVLEC. And the support that was offered, technical support, was in the area of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and grid stability, all of which will be very important to us as we continue our thrust into making Nevis more sustainable. In relation to geothermal, quick update. Since we last were here, we, of course, would have had confirmation from the Caribbean Development Bank of funding to the tune of some $17 million US, $1 million by way of grant, out-and-out grant, and $16 million by way of a contingency recoverable grant. And all that means is that when they do the production drilling, if the drilling is successful, then that is converted to a low-interest long-term loan. If it is not successful, then the money is a grant. And so this has removed the risk of the drilling phase, and we hope to proceed very quickly. The plan is that by June we should have drillers in place, and the drilling we anticipate should last for 6 months, at which point we will issue the RFP for the plant construction. And so we've divided the project into 2 phases. The drilling phase, which is the risky part of the project, and the second phase, which will be the plant construction. If all goes well, as we have promised, we hope to have geothermal energy in Nevis in the very near future. They have sent the agreements for the funding, and those agreements have to be signed off by St. Kitts and by Nevis, the federal government, and the NIA, and we have had those agreements since late December. We are now in the process of finalizing them to get them back to the Caribbean Development Bank so that this project can move forward. I have been in discussions with Prime Minister Drew. He's very enthusiastic about this project, and we are hopeful that working together, we can deliver geothermal energy not only for the people of Nevis, but for the entire Federation. Ladies and gentlemen, let me make 2 important announcements. Ms. LaToya Jones, who was a candidate for the Concerned Citizens Movement in the constituency of St. Thomas's, Nevis 5, she continues to work with the NIA in her role as a special advisor to the Premier on community matters. And Mr. Alexis Jeffers, the Honorable Alexis Jeffers, who also ran in the local election as a candidate in the parish of St. James, Nevis 4, and who now serves as a member, elected member for the constituency of Nevis 11, or is that Nevis 10? Nevis 11, I think. Constituency St. Thomas and St. James. Mr. Jeffers is and has been appointed as a special advisor to the Office of the Premier on Investment Matters, and he has been charged with delivering for us some of these major projects, principally the airport project, which I will get to shortly. He is the point person charged by this government to handle that project. He will report to my office and to the Cabinet on progress with that project, and I want to commend the Honourable Alexis Jeffers. He has really hit the ground running. He has had a number of meetings with stakeholders already, and I just want to use the opportunity now to update members of the press on this airport project. There has been a lot of chatter, but sometimes, as I say, we must ignore the chatter and focus on what is happening. The truth is that if we are all honest, we will all admit that the Vance Amory International Airport has outlived its usefulness in its current form. The last investment done there was done over 20 years ago. And as a consequence, the infrastructure has become largely obsolete. We have been criticized by many that there is no airlift into Nevis, and our hotel sector has complained that it has limited their ability to grow. In terms of investors, many have come and have said that that is a major impediment to them investing. We have homeowners here, wealthy individuals who own private jets. They have said to us that they would like to have the ability to fly directly to Nevis, to park their private jet at the Vance Amory International Airport, and to have access. It has been very difficult for the Nevis Island administration to attract traffic to a facility that is past its usefulness in terms of the infrastructure that is there. I believe that if we are fair, we will all conclude that the airport is in dire need of development. And if Nevis is to be taken to the next level of development, that transportation, including air transportation, is critical. St. Kitts has been carrying the load for both islands. And so we had the various proposals before the Cabinet. We had a proposal to create an international airport, which would have involved considerable works in terms of removing Hurricane Hill, in terms of going well out into the ocean, to create the runway and the facility to take wide-body jets from London and Paris and the like. We looked at that and we thought as a Cabinet that with an international airport 25 minutes away in Antigua, another one 25 minutes away in St. Martin, and one 2 minutes away in St. Kitts, that it was perhaps unwise for the NIA to seek to spend in excess of $100 million to seek to put in place an international airport. St. Kitts and Nevis is one country. There is no need, we feel, to compete between the two islands. We must complement what we do. And so we started to look at other options. And one of those options was to create a very high-end private jet facility that will allow most of the world's private jets to land here, bearing in mind that our tourism product is at the higher end of the market, that those persons on the private jets are precisely the demographic that Nevis's tourism serves. Bearing in mind that a lot of our homeowners on the island have private jets, that they would like, as I've said before, to have their private jets land here and to be parked here. And so we conceptualized a project which will extend the runway to accommodate most of the world's private jets, to reinforce that runway, since we now will have heavier traffic instruments, airplanes on that runway, to do something which really seems like a no-brainer, but it hasn't happened before, which is to provide jet fuel at the airport. That is a huge revenue earner. Currently, for example, when people do fly their jets into Nevis, they have to leave Nevis and go sometimes as far as Puerto Rico to get fuel. So we need to change that. We need parking. We find every year, particularly during Christmas, St. Kitts at RLB is filled with private jets parked there. St. Martin, Juliana Airport is filled with private jets parked there. But the guests, the people on those private jets are neither in St. Kitts nor are they in St. Martin. Oftentimes, those people are in places like Nevis and St. Bart's, and to some extent Anguilla. We have looked very carefully at the model in Anguilla. Anguilla's runway is quite similar to us. The infrastructure is quite similar to ours. But they have expanded it in such a way that not only are they providing greater access to private jets, Anguilla now can also take the regional jets from places like Miami. And so American Airlines, in fact, I was in Miami some months ago, and I was quite pleased walking through the airport to see a flight to Anguilla being posted and persons there gathered to take their flight. Now, these are not the large jets that are going into St. Kitts. These are smaller, what they call regional jets, which usually will carry anywhere from, say, 70 to 110 persons. And so, we feel that that, too, is a market that we can capture. And that in good time, we'll be able to have direct flights from places like Miami using the regional jet equipment that many of the airlines are now employing. Our major hotel, the Four Seasons, has indicated to us that they're quite excited about this prospect. They're quite excited, they say, because sometimes they have groups that want to charter to come in, and the possibility of chartering direct to Nevis is their preferred choice. We also realize that geographically, as we try to complement what is happening on our sister island of St. Kitts, that geographically our airport is closer to Christopher Harbour than RLB is to Christopher Harbour. And that persons landing at the Van Sammer International Airport can be whisked through and to their destination, whether it is to their yacht at Christopher Harbour, or it is to their home at Christopher Harbour, or it is to Park Hyatt, for example, much more quickly than even if they landed in St. Kitts at the RLB. And so we want to offer an alternative to complement what is already going into St. Kitts in terms of the large airlines with scheduled flights from around the world. This is part of our development. But great as the idea may be, we all understand that we can't move unless we can find the resources, financial resources, to do the development. And so we started some conversations with a significant investor on the island, Mr. Patrick Drahi. And those conversations, he is the owner, we're told, of the largest private jet in the world. He has made Nevis home, and he has invested significantly on the island already. And so we started conversation with Mr. Drahi to try to forge a public-private partnership where he will bring the money to finance the infrastructural improvements that we want to do at the Van Sammer Airport. And the negotiations thus far contemplate that what we will do is, rather than that becoming a burden on the taxpayer to repay, we will seek to work together to enhance operations at the airport and to make that airport a revenue center, a revenue stream, and what we will pay back those sums at a nominal interest rate of 2%. We'll pay back those sums from the proceeds of the airport itself. So put differently, all the parties will be invested in making the airport work, because Mr. Drahi's funding will be repaid at 2% from the proceeds of the airport itself. So whatever money is made there, the negotiations are that those monies will be used to pay back that loan from Mr. Drahi. At 2%, that money is what we would say almost free money. We are very grateful that the negotiations have progressed thus far. I know that there's been a lot of chatter, particularly from the opposition, that this is some private deal, that we have not revealed anything. I believe that that is untrue, because I have spoken to the airport expansion plans time and time again right here at this press conference. I have not been able to get into the minutiae of the discussions because we have not yet concluded the agreement. But I'm just giving you the bare bones of what it is we're trying to do. and, of course, saying to you that we have an investor who's prepared to partner with us at terms which are very favorable to the people of Nevis. And so we are working through that. We had yesterday a meeting of the representative for Mr. Drahi. We had a meeting, also at that meeting were the engineers and consultants, Perez Consulting, whom we have been working with for some time. Perez would have done the Argyle International Airport in St. Vincent. And we had at the table as well proposed contractors for the project, Kelly Construction, who have just completed the build-out of the runway in Barbuda and who have had airport experience all around the world. And so we are working with these stakeholders to see if we can come to the necessary terms to do what we need to do at the airport. I will just announce here that it will necessitate some land acquisition. It will necessitate moving some persons to allow the airport expansion to occur. We propose to do this in an open and forthright way. We propose when the time comes, as this government always does, to have public consultations where we come to the public in the usual town hall setting to explain what we are going to do in detail and to get the feedback from members of the public. I thought I would address this today, ladies and gentlemen, because I believe in 2023 there should be less mischief and more effort to work together to advance Nevis. If the airport stays in its current state, it will only continue to deteriorate, and ultimately it will be of no value to the island of Nevis and to our development. We need to develop the airport. And seeking to foster difficulties and anxiety and chaos in the community over a project that all of us who are right-thinking persons must admit is necessary, I think is unfortunate. And so I'm urging those bent on mischief to stop. All these false and malicious headlines about the airport being sold, I have said from this rostrum as the Premier of Nevis that that is not so. And yet people continue with these headlines, that the airport has been sold. I saw one activist, for example, putting up something with a picture of Mr. Drahi saying, meet the new owner of the airport. Now, why is all that necessary? It is false, it is malicious, and I don't know what the end game is intended to be. Is it that they want to scare away the investor so that they can then say nothing is happening and there's no investment? Well, if you say there's no investment and we bring an investor who has already demonstrated, because he has spent already tens of millions of dollars in Nevis, that he is minded. Somebody who has just invested in giving us a brand new CT scan machine at the hospital, which is now functional and available for our use. And you bring that investor and the response is to vilify him for what? So that he can pull out of the project? And if he pulls out of the project, I can hear the narrative now. Oh, they can't attract anybody. We have seen this play before. We brought MSR Media to Nevis in the height of the pandemic. MSR ended up employing some 90 or so people, making movies in Nevis, putting us on the map. Just 2 days ago, I got a message from someone saying they were on a flight. This is the second time somebody has reported that to me. And they watched the movie filmed in Nevis on that flight. Publicity, exposure. Major stars coming here and speaking about our island and how beautiful our island is. And that has sparked interest from others. And there are other conversations with other companies that we're currently having. The response from the opposition? Cost the people. Say, are we giving away Nevis to them and they come here? I saw something that one of them wrote, say the people come with $1,000. Malicious. And at the end of the day, to what end? This morning somebody sent me a headline from the same people that were cussing MSR to say, we have lost out because MSR is moving to St. Kitts. But I would have thought that if you're cussing them, you would say that you're happy they're moving. We have seen and heard this story before. And I want to encourage Divisions to understand that as a government, we can't respond to every noise that is being made out there. I don't say that to be disrespectful. I say that to say that some of the noise that is being made is so malicious, is so imbued with falsehoods, that it matters little what we say. Because I was quite amazed when people suggest that they've never heard anything about this airport project. I have spoken about it right here, time and time again. This allegation that the airport was sold was brought here. And I said categorically that that is false. There are public-private partnerships that occur all around the world. It is a common model for development. In fact, the previous NRP-led administration had examples of that. You all remember a company called BEAD? What did they do? They didn't have the money to do the drilling for water, so BEAD came in, did the drilling, and then BEAD controlled the wells for 10 years until BEAD got their money back. That's what happened. We are not ceding control of our airport. We are entering into an agreement to share the proceeds, the revenue from the airport in such a way as to allow the investor to recoup his investment and allow us to expand and get world-class infrastructure that we currently do not have. I believe the politics is now over, and so I'm not proposing to get too political. But I will just remind members of the press that the only effort at the Vance Armory International Airport that has impacted or had the potential to impact the ownership was when the NRP mortgaged the airport to the SIDF. Shouldn't be quick to forget. Because during an election cycle, they were so desperate for some election money that they routed some $4 million all through the craft house that ended up eventually, they say, to the Yarwoods for the purchase of the airport lands, which had already been in use by the people of Nevis for nigh 50 years. And when I saw the documents myself, I could not believe that they had mortgaged the airport to the SIDF. And so that if we don't pay, the SIDF could claim the Vance Armory International Airport. So perhaps it is in their DNA to sell national assets, but it's not in mine. And it is not in the DNA of the CCM. We are negotiating a partnership. Not to do with ownership, but a partnership to do with a sharing of revenue until we have repaid the sums invested at the nominal rate of 2%. Once this agreement is finalized, we will be able to say much more about it. But I just wanted to clear the air that there is nothing untoward, nothing secret, nothing malicious afoot, except an attempt by a government to negotiate for the improvement, much needed improvement, of a critical piece of infrastructure, which is the airport. And so, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here and tell you that if you have no questions, I'll be very happy. If you have some, I'll try my best to answer them, but to thank you again for being here with me.
Good morning, Mr. Premier.
Good morning.
And good morning to all of those who are present here this morning. Shamika Bajin, Vaughan Radio. I know that you spoke about the asphalt plant catching fire, but are there any plans to fix the bypass road as motorists are complaining of how bad the roads are when driving on that stretch of road? 2, can we get an update on Nevis's first homicide for 2023? Question 3, is there a specific date planned for the 2023 budget as yet? And you just spoke about the airport. You spoke about persons moving, or you may relocate persons with the expansion of the airport. Will there be a plan to cut a new road as well? That's it for me. Thank you.
Ms. Budgeon, you have asked some excellent questions, and thank you as always. The bypass road, you are absolutely correct that the bypass road has deteriorated, and I assume when you say bypass road, you're speaking about the road here from Pinnes. Yes, we do have a plan to get to that. The minister is now looking, Minister Brand, at costing on that. We're hopeful that all we need to do there is to mill that road, because the road itself, surface, is good. It's just that the asphalt is now worn. And so we're hopeful that we can do that road. The intention would be to do this bit down to the junction of Delta. So that would be the idea, and to see what we can do there. Cost is going to be a factor, so we're looking to see what the cost is. But the answer is yes, it's a project that we have to do because of the deterioration of that particular road. The homicide that occurred in my constituency of Bath Village, I think it is a tragedy, as every incident of crime is, but violent crime. I was quite pleased last year that we were able to report only one homicide for the entire year, the first time since 2010. And while I hasten to add that one is one too many, from where we were of 8 and 9 and 10, only having one was actually quite a relief in the circumstances. And we started the new year. In fact, it happened on my birthday, January 11th, so I will always remember. And it happened to someone that I knew very well. His father and I are like brothers. And so it was very sad. The police have, I'm told, several leads. The police are following up on the investigation. I'm hopeful that the perpetrators will be brought to justice, and I continue to ask all of those who may have information to come forward. Crime, I keep saying, is a social problem, and it requires all of society to resolve it. I believe that the days when people were fearful about going out, that those days are arguably over, that we have a new norm that is in Nevis now, where our people are out and about, and we do not want any regression to where we were. And it therefore means that all of us have to be prepared to invest in the peace and ensure that we lend our voices, and at every forum we condemn any form of criminality, and in particular, violent crime. And so the police, I'm sure, will update as we go, but I'm told they have several leads that they are pursuing. The date for the 2023 budget, I want to explain, because this has been yet another attempt at mischief making by the opposition, that somehow there's something untoward, that the budget has not yet been read. I will just remind you, members of the press, that we had an election on the 18th of December 2017, and the budget, therefore, for the 2018 fiscal year was read in the new year. Normally, we would read the budget in December, because our fiscal year runs from January to December. But under the Constitution, we have 90 days after the end of the fiscal year to read the budget for the new fiscal year. And so we have until the 31st of March to read the budget for 2023. We intend to do it by the middle of February. We had an earlier date, I believe it was the 6th of February, but we had to vacate that date because we had the ongoing discussions about the budgetary requirements that were still happening. We're nearly finished with that, and so we anticipate that we should be able to have the budget by the middle of February. And once that date is fixed, we will, of course, make the necessary announcement. You asked of whether a new road will be cut at the airport. The short answer is that, as currently advised, as of yesterday, the answer is yes, that we will need some realignment of the Island Main Road. And that is why, ladies and gentlemen, if you realize that we're doing the Nevis Island Main Road, Surrey Paving has been engaged, but they're only doing as far as the entrance to Mount Nevis. You know that entrance where you turn to go up to Cottle Church? They're only doing as far as there. And then they're picking up again in Newcastle. And so the area in between, we have not bothered to spend money there because we anticipate that we will have to reroute that road. And so we have, in fact, been giving some thought to what we've been doing for some time. And so that is where we currently are. So yes, the intention would be that a new road will have to be constructed to facilitate the expansion of the airport. Any other questions for me?
Good morning, Premier.
Good morning.
Glenn Bart from SKN Newsline. You spoke about the international airport, Ransomme International Airport, and yes, I totally agree that it is a necessity to develop that airport for the betterment of Nevis as a whole. But I know that you also indicated that negotiations are still ongoing.
Yes.
But can you just give us an idea as to what would be the responsibilities of the Nevis Island administration in this whole project? What will they be responsible for? And after the project is completed, what is the role of the NIA in the ongoing scenario until the loan is completed? And also, if you can, kind of give us an idea as to what kind of concessions will be made to the investor who will be bringing in certain amount of capital and the management structure that will be implemented after the project is completed. Secondly, if you can also talk to the primary goals of your tourism industry for 2023. Now you spoke of, I think I remember, a cruise port and some other infrastructure. But for 2023 alone, can you talk to what should the people of Nevis and the people of St. Kitts expect for tourism on Nevis? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bart, and thank you for making the trip over from St. Kitts. I truly appreciate that. You are trying your very best to pull me into giving you details of the negotiations, which I said I wouldn't do until such time as we had something. But if I can just speak broadly, and if you would allow me to, the intention really is to grant concessions, which are quite customary, to the investor in terms of tax concessions, waiver of customs duties, etc., waiver of VAT, that is quite standard, on imports of materials and equipment to deal with this project. The investor is also an investor who's, as I said, have already invested tens of millions of dollars on the island, and so we are seeking to come to an agreement with that investor about other concessions to incentivize him to continue to invest and to have his company invest here. He's one of the most successful business people, not only whom we've been able to attract here, but globally. He is a name that is very well known and incredibly wealthy. He doesn't deal in the millions, he deals in the billions in terms of his own personal wealth and personal estate. And so we're happy that individuals like these have now found Nevis and are calling Nevis home and want to do more here. So we are working through that in terms of offering a package of concessions that will be attractive to him, but I assure you that they're no different to concessions that have been given to other investors that have come as well to the island. And those concessions usually don't entail the government paying out anything, but rather foregoing taxes, foregoing revenue. That is how we normally do it. So that is quite within the norm of what would ordinarily happen. The completed project, during the construction phase, his team will largely manage that effort in terms of the construction. They will be responsible for paying the vendors, etc., during the construction. The hangar that is to be erected there, did I mention? I'm sorry if I didn't mention. So let me go back. We're going to extend and reinforce the runway. We're going to create additional parking. We're going to create an FBO. We're going to create a hangar, and we're going to add fuel to the facility. Of course, we're also going to do lighting and proper fencing. So it really will be transformed into a first-class facility. That's what we're seeking to do. I think we're now at Category 3, and the intention is that we should try to get it to Category 2 airport. Right? Category 1, of course, being the large airports in the world that take large jets. That's not our ambition. So our ambition, as I've defined, is to try to do something which would be within our range. We're talking about an overall investment of 26 million US dollars. That is what is currently being talked about. Again, we are finalizing and getting down into the details, and when we get that, we will have a more accurate figure to work with. Currently, Perez Consulting, they are doing the design work, and so even that, we will then have the design, taking into account the lands that we're seeking to acquire, and the parking and how the airport is going to look. So all of that we will come to the public with at the time when we have that information. So what I'm saying here, a lot of it is preliminary in terms of what the plans are. Once it is done, we will have a shared management structure at the airport because, as I said, the intention is that the revenue stream is what we'll seek to pay back the funds that would have been invested. The NIA is responsible now through NASPA for the payment of staff at the airport, and that will continue. So we will continue to have control and responsibility for our staff through NASPA that are at the airport. Once the airport is finished, that shared management structure is what is being discussed going forward, so that both parties will be involved. The investor feels that he can drive a considerable level of traffic to the airport of the type that we are seeking, and the expectation is that, as I say, we will complement what is happening at RLB, and so that the island, the country now, will have two facilities, one for the international commercial flights and another for the domestic flights, intra-regional flights, but also for private aircraft and the occasional charter or occasional small regional jets that can reach here from Miami, a la Anguilla, a la Dominica. That's what's happening in those jurisdictions. So I hope I have given you a bit more information, but as I said, in terms of the nitty-gritty, we're still trying to fine-tune. In fact, they have only sent a draft agreement to us, I think 2 weeks ago, which our legal department is now looking over. So we haven't yet signed an agreement. In relation to goals of our tourism, I think our goals this year are greater promotion and exposure for the island. We are very much going to be investing in greater exposure. We started this last year with, for example, having the island being displayed on the Jumbotrons at Times Square in New York. That was a first for us. We're inviting more journalists to get more eyes. We're going to be doing more in terms of social media. And our people at the NTA are going to be fanning out across the world to specific events that match the profile of what we're seeking to do in Nevis. Nevis, we have said, is not for everybody. It is not said in a boastful way. It is said rather in a practical way, because we only have a limited number of hotel rooms, and we therefore cannot accommodate the mass market. So what we're trying to do is to cater for the higher end of the market. And I like to say it, I've said it publicly 1,000 times, that I prefer, the Nevis model is we prefer to have 100 guests paying $1,000 a night than to have 1,000 guests paying $100 a night. And some people say the math is the same, and on one view it is the same. But we feel that the 100 guests who are paying $1,000 a night leads to less environmental degradation, it leads to less gridlock on the island, and it ultimately leads to more money, because these are the people who will go out to the restaurants and bars and spend. And in fact, based on the numbers that we have seen, we know, for example, that the Four Seasons has already revised upwards their revenue estimates for this season. And that's always a good sign. So they're already surpassing what they estimated and have revised upwards. And they are indicating to us that this will now be the deepest and longest season that they're going to have, because they have significant groups that are booked all the way down to June and July of this year. Ordinarily, by April, middle of April, early May, the season starts to taper off. But for some reason, I think perhaps due to COVID, there's pent up, how should I put it, appetite for travel. And so people are coming, and they're coming in large numbers. Four Seasons was at 90%, I think just 2 or 3 days ago, and at 90% at this time of year where the rates are the highest. In fact, I will tell you that I was advised by them that they recorded their highest average per room night rate in the history of the hotel in this past season at $2,500 per night. So that is very significant. I'm also advised that the staff at Four Seasons benefited from the highest service charge point in the history of the hotel in this past season. So these are all good indicators. What we are trying to do from the tourism end is to promote and to get more people to come and visit the island. Whether it is through the movies that we're trying to do here, whether it is through the efforts at the NTA and other things that we have in the works that I can't quite talk about yet because we have some delicate discussions that are happening now. But I hope to come back and be able to report. There is, for example, one particular show that is wildly popular in the United States, and the producers have already reached out to ask if Nevis would be minded to have them film here. So we're looking at that to see what we can do. Because, of course, a lot of this comes, again, people will ask for a partnership. So we'll have to determine, is it an investment that we can afford to make, and to look at the possible returns on that investment. So we're looking at various options, Mr. Bart, but the ultimate objective is heads in beds. We want more people here. We want to deepen and lengthen the season. Nevis is beautiful all year round, but we tend to only have people during the winter months in the US and in Europe, and then once it warms up there, we suffer here. So we want to see how we can build that out. And if we can get to June, July, then we go into Culturama, and we shorten the off-season as much as possible. I think that is the goal that we're seeking to achieve. And so that's where we are, and that's what we're seeking to do. Any other questions, I'm sorry, for me?
Good morning, Mr. Premier.
Good morning.
Just some brief questions. Can you give us an update on the Alexandra Hospital expansion? I see it's looking extremely nice on the outside. I can't say I know what's going on the inside. Also, if you could, was the NIA able to pay the salary increase to workers that it had committed to, which would have been for January? I think that would have been 5%. And I think that might be it. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hewlett, I think you are so famous now you didn't say your name. So let me say this is Ms. Lakeisha Hewlett. And Ms. Hewlett, thank you for your questions. In relation to the hospital, you're right. On the outside, it looks absolutely phenomenal because we have decided that what we will do is to improve the aesthetics on the outside because all the work now to be done is to be done on the inside. So we have put in virtually all of the windows now have been fitted. The doors, I think, are going to be fitted as well, the exterior doors. The advice we got from the contractors that they wanted to close up the building, meaning to put in windows and doors because a lot of the interior is going to be sheetrock or drywall, and they're saying they don't want it open to the elements. So you're right, the outside looks beautiful. In fact, the outside looks like it's a finished product, but the work now is the inside work that it's going to be done. We have had thus far one meeting with the new Minister of Health, the Honorable Janelle Nisbet, and the team, and the contractors were there explaining what needs to be done. Part of it is the budgetary process. Of course, we haven't yet had the new budget, but I can assure the public that we will be allocating a significant sum to do the balance of work that needs to be done. Now, why is that important? That's important because a lot of what the hospital now needs are things that have a certain lag time in terms of ordering. So, for example, elevators. We have to order elevators for the hospital. Those are going to take maybe 6 months before they can come. So we have to order them now and pay for them now so that we can get them within 4 to 6 months. That is the kind of lead time that we have on some of these items. And of course, these won't be the ordinary elevators. These are the elevators for hospitals, which will take the gurney and the people on it, etc. So we are building out the infrastructure. I have said to them ambitiously that I would like it to be delivered this year. Contractors don't feel that that is going to be entirely possible, but the idea is really that we're going to work on it and to provide regular updates. Again, this government is an open government. We have nothing to hide. We are trying to build out these bits of infrastructure, whether it's airport, whether it's hospital, which are going to be for the long-term benefit of the island of Nevis and the wider Federation. I know you didn't ask me this, but Mr. Bart, forgive me, I just looked at my note. You did mention the seaport, and I did mention that what we also want to do is to build out infrastructure at our Long Point port, primarily for cargo. But the technical people are saying that we can also get a cruise ship berth, not for the mega ships, let me make that clear, because again, we are not intending to compete with St. Kitts. St. Kitts has a well-oiled machine now in terms of cruise. In fact, I think St. Kitts is one of the most successful cruise destinations now in all of the Caribbean. It's a popular destination, and from which Nevis also benefits, because people come over every time there's a cruise in St. Kitts. The catamarans come to Nevis. I don't mean any discourtesy, Mr. Bart, but I think your people in St. Kitts would agree we have the better beaches over here. So they come over on the cats to experience the beauty of Nevis, and we're grateful for that business. There are businesses on the beach like Lime and all of those. They too have a well-oiled machinery that they benefit. So it's a symbiotic type relationship with the cruise ships that come already. So we are not trying to compete with St. Kitts and their mega ships, but we do get some ships that come to Nevis that are mid-range, mid-size, and there's now currently no facility for them to dock alongside. So if, as the profile of the cruise passenger is sometimes older individuals maybe with slight disabilities, meaning arthritis and all that, that prevents them from being as agile as they might have been when they were young, for them to get on a tender to come to shore, it's a little difficult. And so we feel we're losing out because a lot of people don't bother to come off the ship. So we are hopeful that we can build a facility that could accommodate the medium-sized ships that we currently get, and that tend to be the higher end of the market as well, because the smaller ships tend to be the ones that attract the higher end clientele. So the people that we hope will come can then dock alongside, make it easier for them. So our ambitions are, again, not to compete, but to complement. And we are hopeful that those ships, I think the largest one we get now is only about 850 passengers or thereabouts. So those that are taking 4,000 and 6,000 passengers and things like that, we leave that to our sister St. Kitts. They have really demonstrated that they're quite adept at dealing with that. I sometimes imagine what Charleston would be like with 5 or 6 mega ships with 40,000 people on the streets of Charleston. And I don't think that that's the model for Nevis. As I said, St. Kitts now has a very well-oiled machine dealing with that, and we think we can complement what they're doing over here with a small version that is boutique and that caters to the smaller ships. And so that's the plan. Although I confess that in terms of development for this 5-year term, our airport and the ring road that we're talking about, those 2 new projects are the priority. So meaning if we are to scale them 1, 2, 3, we're looking at those 2 projects as early priorities for the administration, in addition, of course, to the projects that we're already doing, like the hospital. So I wanted to just add that. Coming back to you, Ms. Hewlett, the salary increase, I'm quite proud to say yes. I believe salaries were paid on the 19th of January, and everybody who works for government got the 5%, except the ministers. I want to note that, I want a headline. Except the ministers. The ministers would not have got a penny in salary increase. The salary increases that have been offered, 15%, payable over the course of 3 years, with 10% already paid, has only gone to the public servants. I'm now thinking about it, P.S. We should have excluded the permanent secretaries as well, but everybody has got, except the ministers, because we didn't think that it was something that we should extend to the ministers at this point in time. So the short answer is yes, we're quite proud and pleased that we've been able to honor that commitment. I know at the time the decision was controversial because there was a 10% paid in St. Kitts. We all knew it was a political gimmick, but it's a gimmick that failed in the end because it was for naught. But 10% was paid in St. Kitts, and we couldn't afford to do it in Nevis. And I was not shy about coming to the public and saying to the public that this was what we could afford. We could afford 5%, which we paid, I think it was in June, retroactive. And then we promised another 5% on January 1st. That has now been paid as of paychecks of January 19th, which was payday. And we anticipate another 5% on January 1st, 2023. And that would mean 15%, the largest salary increase in the history of Nevis that would have been paid to our public servants. And as I said, I would hope that, if not a headline, at least a footnote, Ms. Hewlett, that the politicians didn't get anything. We serve people, not ourselves. Yes.
Sorry, just to follow up. In terms of that salary increase paid to public servants, could you give us an idea of the amount that that would have costed the NIA? And also with respect to the airport, if and when this you get this PPP going, how long do we anticipate that project to run for? Like, is it a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year project? If you can say.
Okay. The airport project we expect to be fully delivered within 2 years. That is the estimated time of build out, commissioning, doing all that we need to do. We've said to them that once we start, we want to just go to completion. And as I said, once we have the financial resources, that is what is most critical. In terms of the actual costs, our wage bill in Nevis is usually in the order of about 8 to 8.5 million EC dollars a month. So when you add 10% to that, what do you get? About $850,000. So I would say if we were to round it off, we're talking about probably an additional $1 million a month in terms of payments, direct payments to our public servants.
I'm so sorry, I'm not hogging the mic. Mr.
No, you don't need to be
Beyond
sorry.
would have given me permission to ask one final question. We saw in at the opening of the Nevis Island Assembly where there was no opposition leader named. Can you speak to that and the implications it would have on that parliament, please?
Well, thank you for the question. It is regrettable because I think that the whole of Nevis wanted to see at the start of the new parliament, we had new members. On the opposition side, we have the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge, who's the leader of the NRP. She would have narrowly won a seat in St. James by 8 votes, and she has joined the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons, who was there from the constituency of St. Thomas's Nevis 5 and continues to be there. And one would have expected to have seen a leader of the opposition named, but also to see a senator on the opposition benches as well named. Neither happened. And neither happened because we are told that there's gridlock within the opposition. The Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons, we gather, is unwilling to support the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge for leader of the opposition unless the Honorable Janice Daniel Hodge is prepared to allow the Honorable Cleon Stapleton Simmons to appoint the senator. This is what has thus far come to light. I think the whole thing is quite sad because the NRP promised that they were bringing a different flavor to the politics in Nevis. They said they wanted change. And many people got carried away on this bandwagon of change. They said, change, change, change. That was the cry. The NRP didn't even publish a manifesto in the last election. I wonder if the press realized that. They did not publish a manifesto. It means that they did not put out any set of ideas, any set of commitments. They just said that we want change. And so one would have thought that they would have been ready for that change that they said they wanted. But if this fracas, this chaos, this brouhaha that we are now seeing is any indication, we shudder to think what would have happened if they had got into government on the 12th. Because nothing could have been worse than one saying, well, I am now the premier, and one saying, no, I'm not going to support you to be premier unless I get to name the senators, the appointed members. Oh, I want you to be Minister of Tourism. No, I'm not going to be Minister of Tourism. I want Ministry of Finance. Seems to me the NRP has a lot of chiefs and no Indians. And that's a problem. It's a failure of leadership. And I want not to make light of it, but to say to the people of Nevis that, in a way, we're being sent a very clear message. This is what could have been. This is what when you get carried away on the emotion of change without examining what you're changing to. This is what could have been. Where you could literally have had no swearing in, no government, because one person going north, one going east, one going west. And the leader has no control over the team. So, it doesn't give me any pleasure to say these things because I think it is rather sad. I think people are looking on and people are disappointed because these are in large measure newcomers to the politics, and we see the behavior. And again, I could only imagine what would have happened if this were in government. As it is now, the island can function because the island has a government. But if this were in government, where people are trying to dictate what ministries they're going to take and not take, who they're going to support for leader, premier, and not. I mean, maybe even the context of what date we have for the parliament. I said, well, I'm not going to go on that date. New date. It seems there's no interest in cooperating. And I think those of us who are in the politics, and I promise not to get too political, but those of us who are in the politics always knew that the people who had stepped forward for the NRP was dysfunctional. It was always a dysfunctional relationship. And we knew that. And anybody in NRP also knew it. But they came and they said to the people that this was the position. The ink had not dried properly on the results before the chaos erupted. And it's unfortunate. I'm hopeful that they get it together. And whoever of the 10 or 15 names that I'm hearing being called for junior minister, I didn't hear Mr. Bijan, you're not in the running? Junior minister, okay. Not junior minister, senator. But I've heard so many names now of so many people have been asked. I want to know how one job could attract so many possibilities. They ask all kind of people. And I'm told the last person they asked actually accepted. And then she turned around and she said, with the confusion, she's withdrawn. So I don't know at the end of the day how this thing is going to work out, because it is really a sad situation that we find ourselves in. So, short answer to you, we expected that that would happen in terms of a leader of the opposition and a senator. That has not happened. We are hopeful that by the next sitting, or the one after that, or the one after that, that we will have something. The leader of the opposition would be important for, say, appointment to the Integrity Commission, various consultation where the Constitution requires, if there's somebody in that position, a consultation. But we recall that in the last session of Parliament, there was no leader of the opposition, because even though the Honourable Cleon Stapleton Simmons was in Parliament, she was the only member in the opposition who had won a seat, and the Constitution requires that the person who's leader of the opposition must have the support of at least one other elected member who's opposed to the government. So currently, with two members, you have gridlock, because it's either the Honourable Janice Daniel Hodge will support the Honourable Cleon Stapleton Simmons to be leader, or vice versa. And if one said not you, and the other one said not you, then the two of them are going to sit down in the Parliament in opposition, but there'll be no leader. So, I have seen a letter that has been circulated from the Honourable Janice Daniel Hodge to the Governor General. Don't ask me how these things are being circulated. But, as I said, nothing anymore is treated with any confidence. So there's a letter that has been circulated that is signed by her, indicating that she will be leader of the opposition. There's a space for the Honourable Cleon Stapleton Simmons to sign, and there's no signature from the Honourable Cleon Stapleton Simmons. So I think that speaks for itself. I gathered that last night the Honourable Cleon Stapleton Simmons would have addressed some of these matters. And NRP is a party of long standing. I suppose they will work out their math. I am just happy that the people of Nevis are really getting a bird's eye view of what could have been. What could have been, when we get carried away and talk about change and we don't give ourselves an opportunity to know what this change is going to look like, and who the people that say they're agents of change are really bringing to the island of Nevis. Because what we see on display here, Ms. Hewlett, has nothing to do with the island of Nevis. What we see on display here is all about self, all about who wants power and position, and the people of Nevis have been forgotten in what we see on display. And I just want you to compare that to the Blue Ocean liner, which is CCM. Smooth, good captain, steady hand at the wheel, good mates on board, supporting the efforts that we are trying to make. Not a ripple, not a noise. We are trying to do the best we can in a forthright and honest way and putting our people first, not ourselves. That's why I say we didn't get the salary increase. People got it, not us. Any other questions for me?
Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year, and I am Bjorn Hanley representing BHC Media. Mr. Premier, I took note during the last election in Antigua. Yes. While they were counting the votes, it was transparent. They had ABS inside there, other media personnel inside there, and they were communicating the information to the general public. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, in the last Nevis election and in St. Kitts and Nevis, the voting process is like a secrecy. It's like done in secrecy. The counting of the votes is done
not
in
the voting.
not the vote. Okay. Yes, the counting. Yes, it's in secrecy, and like last election, you had hours passing and nobody know what was happening in there. My question is, do you think there is a need for more transparency during the counting of votes during elections in St. Kitts and Nevis? During the pandemic, the government made some cuts in Nevis, one being travel allowance for public servants. Some public servants would like to know if and when their travel allowance will be reinstated. Last question, is there any data available which shows the unemployment rate in Nevis? And what is your plan to create new sustainable and innovative jobs in Nevis? Thank you.
Mr. Hanley, thank you very much. I think all excellent questions. The counting process, I agree with you. I think that we engender greater confidence when the process is more open. And if it is that the media presence would make it possible that it's more open, and so be it. I will tell you that I was actually at home. Matter of fact, I fell asleep because between the hours of perhaps 1:30 and maybe after 3, when I was the only horse still out there, we knew already what the other results were. There was clearly a buildup of anxiety, and people were, and in a vacuum, and that is where the point I want to make. In a vacuum, people are going to make up their own stories. And so, for example, I started to hear that I was there demanding recounts. I was home. In fact, as I said, I fell asleep at one point. I never left my house until it was, I think, after 3 in the morning that I got a call from the Honorable Troy Libert, who said to me that there was a problem and that the counting had in fact stopped, and that Dr. Patricia Bartlett of the NRP, who was the candidate for the NRP against me in that election, as she was actually at the counting station, which was at the cultural village. And so I said, well, if Dr. Bartlett is there, I think it makes sense for me to make myself available and to go there. I was actually leaving my house when he called back to say the issue had been resolved and that there was no need for me to come. But I said, well, I'm already driving, so I'll come anyway. And I remember as I came down the road, I passed Dr. Bartlett on the road, just above Hosford's, speeding going home. At that point, clearly, she knew what the results were. And so I went down. By the time I got there, everything was locked up, closed up. The police officers were there. The various agents were there. I think there was an Aaron Howell, and Mr. Stephen Hector. Those were the ones who were there on behalf of NRP. And there was Mrs. Josette Myers and Mr. Jermaine Anthony who were there on behalf of CCM. And then the officials and the police. But all the boxes, the ballot boxes, were already taped up and closed up. And they explained to me that the problem was these 16 ballots And the issue appeared to have been that the tally clerk said that there were, I'm just going to use a number because I don't remember the precise number. But let us say that the tally clerk said that 300 votes were cast in that particular station. When they came to the counting, they found 316 ballots in the ballot box. And that is what apparently led to all of this delay. It turns out, as I'm told, that it was merely a clerical error, and that, in fact, the tally was correct, meaning the votes in the box were, in fact, correct. And I find it instructive because with all the noise that was made about these 16 ballots, not a word was said about the 16 ballots in the election petition that has been filed by Dr. Bartlett. So it is plain to me that she too accepts that it was a simple clerical matter and not any fraud or any problems with the election. I believe if the media were there in the room, we probably would have been able to understand what was going on. And so all this chat out there about asking for a recount and all of this nonsense wouldn't have been part of the discussion. I think a lot of suspicions were created because of the silence. And so I think that's important. And I will tell you that the rule that they've now introduced is that, mobile phones, it's a complete lockout. So I couldn't reach. In fact, I spoke to my counting clerks after 7 on the 12th, and I never spoke to them again until after 3 on the 13th, after 3 in the morning. Because no matter how I text and ask what's happening, there was no response. None. I tried to reach Mr. Ron Claxton. I see my message delivered, no response. So their approach is that they will only report to the supervisor, and then the supervisor will report to the public. And that is how they did it. So I feel that even for me, at my age now, when I was younger, I could bear it, but at my age now, it's more difficult. And so I think that is better for all of our hearts and our blood pressure and everything, that the media is there and there's greater transparency to that process. But having said that, remember though, Mr. Hanley, that you have both parties are in the room, both political parties. So the ability to do anything untoward is severely limited by that. And as I indicated, the NRP had 2 people in the room, and the CCM had 2 people in the room. So if even one had fallen asleep, the other one was there. So I think that explains that, but I would agree with you that greater transparency is necessary. Travel allowance, I believe that the COVID restrictions that we had put in place have for the most part been lifted, but I will have to confirm that on the travel allowance. I'm not sure whether or not that was lifted. I do know that the freeze on increments, that had been lifted, and so persons were able to get their increments. We're now looking now with the 10% salary increase that has been given, how we manage that so that we don't exacerbate and make more difficult the recurrent budget. Unemployment rate in Nevis, I'm fascinated that you asked me that question because just 2 days ago, that question was asked of me, and I inquired of Social Security whether they had that data, and they said no. So they only seem to have the data as to the levels of employment, meaning how many people are employed, but not data in terms of how many people are unemployed. And the question more specifically was the unemployment rate among youth, and that data wasn't available. So I regret that I have no ability to answer that particular question. Anything further for me?
Okay, Hewlett, Department of Information. One final question from me. I know you received a slew of letters over the Christmas and into the New Year in terms of the elections. What has become of those election petitions?
Letters? Petitions, you mean? Yes. Yeah. You're right. We had the NRP filing 2 election petitions. One was filed by Dr. Patricia Bartlett seeking to overturn the election in St. John's, and the other was filed by Ms. J.D. Keynes seeking to overturn the election in St. Paul's. Patricia Bartlett would have lost by 147 votes. J.D. Keynes would have lost by 27 votes. Instructively, we did not file a petition overturning Janice Daniel Hodge, who won by 8, because we decided that people had spoken, let us just proceed. and continue with the government. The petitions, in the case of J.D. Keynes, it is our considered view that it is out of time, having not been filed within the time prescribed by law. And so I believe that the Honorable Spencer Brand has applied to strike out her petition on that and other grounds. I too have applied to strike out the petition of Dr. Bartlett because it really discloses no cause of action. And we feel it is also out of time in that the petition was not perfected. Under the law, there should be a notice of presentation of petition, there should be a recognizance. Neither of those was done within the time prescribed, and neither of those was served on me within the time prescribed. And so we are arguing that the petition is bad because the lawyers didn't do what they were supposed to do. The law and the procedures relates to election petitions is very specific and very particular, and the courts have not exercised any discretion to allow you to get outside. Normally, if you have X amount of time to file something, the court can sometimes look at extenuating circumstances and allow you. But because an election petition usually seeks to challenge what the electorate has determined or what has been declared, then the courts take a very stringent view and say, this is what the law requires, you must bring yourself within the law. And our argument is they did not. The chatter out there, of course, in the public square was that the CCM had engaged in some fraud and, to use local parlance, we had thiefed the election. But there are absolutely no allegations in the petitions about anything untoward. In fact, in my petition, Dr. Bartlett says that my name is Mark Brantley, I was a candidate, and I was declared the winner. There was the only mention of Mark Brantley. In the petition J.D. Keynes brought against Spencer Brand, she said his name is Spencer Brand, he was the candidate, he was declared the winner. All the allegations in both petitions center around the objection process. And what they say is that they filed objections to names that were on the master list. Let me back up because I think it's important. Let me take 2 minutes to explain. Every year in January, the Electoral Office will publish what they call a master list. That is the list of all the voters on the island. And you then have, I think, 10 days to file objections. Why is that important? It's important because if Mr. Wakely Daniel lives in Cotton Ground and was lawfully and quite properly registered in Cotton Ground, but he has since the last publication moved to Brownhill, then somebody, when that annual list is published, can object to him on the basis that he no longer lives in Cotton Ground. We have the phenomenon, of course, of the overseas voter. So that is somebody who come home for Christmas and decide, I'm going to register. And then somebody objects to that name. Well, how are they going to find them? They don't live here. And the law is not quite clear how you deal with that aspect of it. And then you have people who, for a variety of reasons, I say, well, somebody has registered in St. John's. They've never lived in St. John's. So the master list allows the parties a chance to look, peruse, and to object. And a certain time frame set out in terms of the objections. So the NRP is saying that they filed 151 objections in St. John's, but that a substantial number of those objections were not completed by the time the December 12th election came about. Now just bear with me because you would realize that if you made objections in January 2022, the election was in December 2022, that's 12 months. And at no point during that 12-month period did the NRP take any legal steps in relation to that. They waited, contested the election, lost the election, and now having lost the election, they say, oh, by the way, these objection hearings should have occurred. I think the law is quite consistent because others have tried this before and have failed because the courts have said that there is a very clear process available to you to deal with objections. And the election petition process is not that process. Election petition, you must say something happened on election day, which was irregular or improper, and it therefore affected the outcome of the election. Talking about Mr. Foy, who's the registration officer, should have done this and he should have done that, when for 12 months you did nothing. You never went to court to compel Mr. Foy to do anything. You just sat back. And then what makes the claims of the NRP now even more incredulous is the fact that they contested a federal election in August. Remember, they're complaining now about objections they made since January. But they contested a federal election on the 5th of August, 2022, on the same list, with the objections not heard. And they made no fuss at all about it then. This now is, therefore, what they have come to say at this stage, that that process was flawed. One of the other things that we've noticed is that they simply list the 151 people and say, these were the people that we objected to, and because the objections were not all heard, that means the election is bad. But they didn't say, for example, how many of those 151 actually voted. Because if none of them voted, then clearly it doesn't affect the outcome. If only 10 of them voted, it doesn't affect the outcome. In fact, when we went to the list, we found persons on that list who were deceased. We found persons who had already transferred to other constituencies. Mr. Hanley, we found some who had transferred up to Gingerland and voted in Gingerland. So the list itself is defective. And then in the case of Ms. Keynes in town, St. Paul's, Ms. Keynes makes the most interesting observation and is inviting the court to overturn the election, she says, on the basis that some persons listed in the third schedule were not given the opportunity to vote. The only problem is that when we look at the list of names in the third schedule, some of those persons are deceased. And so again, it begs the question, why would you make the case to a court that it is an electoral irregularity that dead people did not get a chance to vote? So it makes no sense. I will simply say that again, it must be the lawyers who copied and pasted and didn't pay attention to what they were doing. But Ms. Keynes is making the allegation and asking a judge to overturn the election of Mr. Brand on the basis, she says, that some persons who are deceased were not given the chance to vote. And that is a most interesting proposition. So, we don't feel that the petitions are going anywhere. The last I heard that the strikeouts are to be heard on the 30th of January. And so we expect that within the next few days, if that goes through, we will know what the position of the court is in relation to those. Any other?
Ms. Budgin of Von Radio. I would like to reconfirm something, and I will conclude with this question. Now, the last time we were here, I asked for an update on the new CT scan at the Alexandra Hospital, and I was told that persons were being trained. So are you saying, I know that you mentioned about the CT scan, are you saying that the machine is fully up and running for the public and the individual persons are now fully trained? That's my question. Thank you. And probably you can put in a plug, if it's yes, probably you can put in a plug as an advertisement for the hospital, seeing that persons are still going over to seeing kids. Thank you.
All right. Ms. Budgeon, thank you very much. When I said that persons were being trained, they were being trained by Philips, the manufacturer of that piece of equipment, on that equipment. And so the short answer is yes, Philips, as part of the package that was purchased from them, provided training. So the persons in the radiology department at the hospital would have been trained on this piece of equipment by Philips, who came to install it and to do the training. So the short answer is the training has been completed. The equipment is fully up and running. In fact, we have just approved the cabinet of pricing for the service that the minister would have brought for cabinet's approval of what the pricing is going to cost. It will be significantly cheaper for people on Nevis to use a service in Nevis. Because even though the pricing is similar to what is on offer in St. Kitts, the people who go to St. Kitts have to pay ambulance fee, they have to pay boat fee, they have to do all of these other factors normally. That carries up the cost significantly for them. So if you can cut out the cost of the ambulance and the cost of the seabridge and all of that, you're getting it maybe $1,000 cheaper if you were to do it in Nevis than if you were to go to St. Kitts. The people in St. Kitts, we encourage them to come to Nevis because the machine is currently the best that's available in the Federation. So in terms of the quality of images that you get, this is a brand new 128 slice machine. It is the only one of its kind in the Federation. And it is, I think, only the second in the region, the sub-region, the OECS. Grenada has one as well. So it means, therefore, that for the higher quality imaging that some diagnoses may require, that Nevis right now has that capacity. What we don't have here in Nevis is a radiologist. And we're about to, something is before the cabinet for a young woman who's going away now to specialize. And we have somebody else out there already working at that, whom we hope is going to be back shortly. So what we're doing is we're involving, I think the language I use is telemedicine, where you're getting the images done, but you're then sending the images to a radiologist for the radiologist to read the images for you. That's done all around the world. In fact, in countries like India, they've developed a very good industry of experts who do that and the businesses that provide that service. I believe currently we're using a radiologist on St. Kitts. So the film will be sent and analyzed there. We are in the budgetary process now, and we've already approved the budget to get our own radiologists hired on the island of Nevis. But in terms of the equipment, up and running, staff trained, and already the equipment has been put to good use. Anything further, Mr. Bart?
Just one other question. Glenn Bart from Erskine News 9. Right now, in the federal parliament, the CCM has majority of seats in on the opposition benches. And it is often said since the last election that perhaps this is the most appropriate time for discussion on constitutional change. Would the CCM be interested in modifications of the Constitution? Because I think if this is to go through, they will need the support of the opposition benches. So what is your stance as a party in terms of the constitutional arrangement between St. Kitts and Nevis?
Mr. Bart, that's an excellent question, but it is one that we've answered already. And so I use the opportunity to answer it again, that yes, we would be interested. In fact, I believe that the Honorable Garth Wilkin, the Attorney General, has already stated publicly that he has had early meetings with the legal department here. The intention really would be to put in place a constitutional review commission. The Prime Minister has spoken to me about it and has asked for nominations to that commission and to look at the constitutional construct. Bear in mind that the Constitution that we've had has not changed in 40 years. And as much as politicians have come and gone and argued and said it's bad and it's this, we have had every configuration in our government now. We've had PAM, NRP in the federal government together. We've had Labour. We've had Labour, NRP. Then we had PLP, PAM and CCM. And now there's Labour again. And so everybody has had a chance, so to speak, on the government benches. And not even a comma in the Constitution has been changed in 40 years. So I said to you that it is time that we did a review, and there are certain things that we must look at. The world has moved on. The world of 40 years ago is not the world today. And we now need to refine that Constitution so that it is fit for purpose. And there are certain things that we took for granted a long time ago, that those things are no longer current. And I give you an example, which might be a controversial example, but I give you an example. The Constitution, for example, doesn't guarantee any fundamental rights for people based on their sexual orientation. doesn't currently. 40 years ago, that might not have been something that is particularly talked about. But more and more now, in the various jurisdictions, and I'm sure you would have heard that in some jurisdictions, cases have been taken to the courts where people are demanding that they be treated equally, and that laws that we had on the books since the colonial times, that those laws be struck down because it infringes their human rights. I say that to say that our perception of what human rights are, what human rights ought to be, that those perceptions have changed over time. We have a lot of ideas that perhaps even when I was a boy might have been alien are now, with technology and otherwise, part and parcel of our everyday life, and therefore would have to be looked at. And I think the time is now ripe, and we are prepared, definitely prepared, to be a part of that exercise in terms of looking at the Constitution, determining what needs to be reformed, and doing what is necessary. I will hasten to say, however, that the Constitution of St. Kitts and Nevis is not going to be easy to change, because those who put it together put in place some very stringent entrenchment provisions. So, some people say, for example, they want to remove Clause 113. That's a secession clause for Nevis. To get that done is virtually impossible, because you need a referenda in both St. Kitts and Nevis, a referendum in St. Kitts and a separate referendum in Nevis. And each you must get 2/3. We usually can't agree on most things, so how are you going to get 2/3 of people on St. Kitts to agree? And 2/3 of people on Nevis to agree to some measures. So some of the provisions, I think, are going to be difficult in terms of how we reform. One option might be to have a complete, I don't know what the precise language is, but repeal, and you kind of get a new constitution altogether. I think some countries have done that. But again, it would have to require careful study to determine what is the best way forward, and whether or not we can do some amendments to this one that will take us forward. But we need, I think, to do more things like privacy. Might not have been so critical years ago, because 40 years ago when this Constitution was put in place, nobody had cell phones, and nobody was spying on you, and we didn't have spyware and all this thing that people do, and nobody was using computers where people are hacking your information and putting your information online and all of that. That was alien. That is now commonplace today. So should the Constitution now be guaranteeing a right to privacy? Not leaving it for implication, but actually setting it out as we've set out the rights, other rights to life and liberty and that kind of thing. So I think that this is a conversation, and I look forward very much to that conversation, because I think the time is nigh. After 40 years, we have matured, and it is time now for us to look and see what we can do to make things better for ourselves and for generations to come. Are there any more questions for me? No? Gentlemen and ladies of the press, thank you very much. NTV, thank you very much. My good friend Carl, who's always here, quiet in the back, he takes care of all the technical things. Thank you all for being here. Mr. Daniel, thank you. You have introduced me for every press conference that we've had. And if we've been doing them for 5 years, that means what? 12 a year, 5 years, 60? By my math, that's quite a lot. Thank you all very much for being here and for being a part of the first press conference. I look forward to engaging with you again, God willing, in the coming month. Thank you. God bless you.